Hi, my name is Kate, and I'm doing my diversity and culture speech with me to my audience. And I'm going to hand the phone to my friend here, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so today my goal is to teach you all about the Armenian Genocide, a tragedy that is mostly untalked about, especially here in America. And I just want to shed some light on that and how looking at this genocide can affect how we view genocides in our modern times. So first, in order to talk about that, we talk about what is a genocide. Genocide is a word that was coined by Raphael Lemkin in 1942 as part of the United Nations genocide conventions. He defined it as the destruction of a nation or ethnic group, and it constitutes many things, obviously killing, but very much other things that affect a population's outcome in life that leads to its ultimate destruction. Mm-hmm. Let's get into that later. So first, again, this is one of the most well-documented and honestly earliest instances of genocide that we can consider modern. I believe that learning about the circumstances around the Armenian people at the time leading up to the genocide will help us to understand genocides as they look to occur. So first, you have to ask the question, why is this not talked about? There's several reasons why this isn't talked about. There's denialism still even to this day. There's whitewashing of the events that happened. And finally, it is just overshadowed by the Holocaust, which would occur about 30 years later. Mm-hmm. The Armenian genocide was a topic that I did not know about until I recognized that some of my favorite music artists, specifically Serj Tankian of System of a Down, talked about it in interviews, and I never knew about it, so I wondered why it wasn't talked about, and I looked into it, and I found myself more confused as to why this wasn't talked about more when we bring up genocides. It's typically just the Holocaust we talk about, but let's talk about the main points we're going to cover today. So, we're going to talk about the context around the Armenian people in the Ottoman Empire leading up to the genocide. The Ottoman Empire is modern-day Turkey. The events that officially started the genocide and its immediate effects on the Armenian people, and the lasting effects of the genocide and how it affects Armenian people today, as well as how it helped to shape the United Nations genocide conventions, and the consequences of denial. So first, getting into the events that led up to the genocide, there was already a lot of prejudice towards minorities in the Ottoman Empire, Armenians being one of them, and even more prejudice towards different religions other than Islam. So Armenian people, typically being Christian in that area, were targeted, and the attacks on them only spiked in the latter half of the 1800s due to military losses, economic crises, and general public unrest. This led to a rise in nationalism, and so minorities, when nationalism thrives, minorities tend to suffer. So there were several actions, including killings, that led to this genocide, but there were several mass murders events that occurred beforehand that would actually be considered the beginning of the genocide according to genocide scholars. So first, the official date that many consider the beginning of the Armenian genocide is April 24th, 1915, when the Ottoman Empire arrested 250 Armenian scholars under suspicion of colluding with Russia. In May of 1915, they began to deport Armenian peoples out of their eastern provinces, and additionally passed laws that allowed them to seize the abandoned properties that came as a result of this. In spring of 1915, the actual killings and mass murders began. In the years spanning 1915 until the end of World War I, a death toll of between 600,000 to 1.2 million would occur, but several other genocidal actions such as torture, selling the women and the girls into slavery, and everything else that can disenfranchise and put a population in a disadvantage occurred to the Armenian people during these times. So, now getting into the post-genocide effects. First of all, Raphael Lemkin was inspired by the events that happened in the Armenian genocide whenever he coined the phrase. Though it wasn't until the Holocaust, whenever it became official, this is where he began to think of what the word genocide meant. And yet still there is denialism amongst some people, and specifically two countries, that what occurred was not a genocide. Uruguay would actually be the first country to officially recognize the Armenian genocide in 1965, and it would take most other countries decades before they would recognize, with President Biden being the first sitting U.S. president to officially recognize it in a speech he gave on the Armenian Genocide Day. The two countries that still deny that what happened was a genocide or deny their parts in it is Azerbaijan and Turkey. Turkey being the modern day Ottoman Empire. So, with this denial, how does this affect the Armenian people? Well, first, if you look up how the genocide denial affects Armenian people, the very first result on Google is the Turkish Republic's article, essentially defending themselves, saying that, as you can read here, the Armenian deaths do not constitute genocide, despite virtually every single genocide scholar disagreeing with that statement. Due to this denial, the Armenian and Turkish people's relationships remain strained, as one side doesn't believe that anything truly occurred, that no crime was committed, and that causes reparations to also be impossible. To reparate is to admit fault. It is something that the government has not had any interest in doing. And finally, closure for victims is impossible. This happened 100 years ago, but even if there's no surviving victims of this, there are still victims in the form of family and disenfranchisement and generational wealth that are still affected to this day.
Right.
So, leading to the conclusion here, we talked about what caused the genocide, the events that actually occurred in the genocide, and what the post-genocidal effects are on the Armenian people, as well as the denialism that has occurred. Throughout this, I hope that now we can look to see how this, the knowledge of this historical event can now be applied to modern times, and how Armenians are still affected by this history and its denialism. And finally, what are the actual harmful effects of this? As the old saying goes, those who do not learn their history are doomed to repeat it, and so I hope that with this, we have learned what a genocide looks like, as this is quite literally the event that shapes its initial definition. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me. Again, my name is Caden Jett, and thank you.